Let's be honest, some cryptids are genuinely terrifying. Others were literally invented as a joke. Today, I'm breaking down every famous cryptid, explaining what they actually are, ranking them from the most obviously fake to the ones that still have scientists scratching their heads. And we're starting with the one that has zero business being this interesting jackalope. This is the most transparently fake cryptid on this entire list, and it's not even trying to hide it. The jackalope, a portmanteau of jackrabbit and antelope, was invented in 1932 when a kid named Douglas Herrick tossed a rabbit carcass next to some deer antlers in his taxidermy shop in Douglas, Wyoming. He mounted them together as a gag. The local Chamber of Commerce saw dollar signs and turned it into a full-blown tourist attraction. So yeah, it's a rabbit with antlers glued on. Case closed. But here's where it gets weird. Rabbits infected with the shop papilloma virus actually grow horn-like and antler-like tumors on their heads and bodies, meaning some of the earliest horned rabbit reports from centuries ago weren't hoaxes at all. They were real, sick animals. The most deliberately fake cryptid on this list accidentally has the most grounded scientific explanation. But if you think a rabbit with a virus is strange, wait until you see what's lurking in the California suburbs at 3 a.m. Fresno night crawlers. Most cryptids have a story, a first sighting, a famous witness, a moment that kicked everything off. The Fresno night crawlers have none of that. These things are described as bipedal creatures with bizarre proportions, almost all legs and no real upper body. Sightings have popped up across Fresno, Carmel, Yosemite, and even as far out as Billings, Montana. But there's no origin event, no expedition, no colonial mythology, no single catalyzing moment that anchored the legend into public consciousness. The entire nightcrawler phenomenon exists almost exclusively through internet forums and cryptid databases. That's it. No newspaper, archives, no government investigations, no famous photographs. This is what a cryptid looks like before it makes it: scattered, inconsistent, poorly documented, and still somehow spreading. If the jackalope's problem was being too obviously fake, the nightcrawler's problem is being too vague to even debunk. But vague or not, at least they're harmless. The next entry on this list has a body count attached to it. Beast of Bray Road. In 1991, a local newspaper in Walworth County, Wisconsin, assigned a reporter named Linda Godfrey to debunk some weird sightings on a rural farm road. She went in skeptical. She did not come out that way. Here's what kept showing up in witness reports. A 6 to 7 foot tall creature with a wolf-shaped head, glowing red eyes, moving on 2 legs and sometimes dropping to 4. Multiple independent witnesses. Same description every time. The earliest sighting goes back to 1936 when a night watchman at St. Coletta's school saw something digging on an Indian burial mound. But the one that really gets people is the driver who hit something on Bray Road, got out to check, and watched a massive wolf-like creature charge toward her car. She barely made it back inside. It left claw marks on the door. Skeptics say it's a misidentified gray wolf or a mange-ridden black bear, but wolves are basically non-existent in southern Wisconsin, and last time I checked, bears don't leave claw marks on car doors while chasing people on 2 legs. Godfrey eventually wrote an entire book about it. She never confirmed what the creature was, but she was fully convinced the witnesses weren't lying. And if you think a werewolf in Wisconsin sounds unsettling, wait until we get to something that fell out of the sky in 1952. Flatwoods Monster. Most cryptids sound like folklore. This one sounds like a classified military report. On September 12th, 1952, brothers Edward and Freddie watched a bright flash streak across a hilltop near Flatwoods, West Virginia. Their mother, Kathleen May, didn't dismiss it. She grabbed a National Guard teen named Eugene Lemon, the family dog, and headed up the hill to investigate. What they found was a 10-foot tall creature with glowing eyes, a spade-shaped head, and what looked like a metallic skirt. It wasn't walking, it was hovering, and it was emitting a noxious hissing gas that left multiple witnesses vomiting with sore throats for days afterward. Here's what makes this one genuinely strange. The creature didn't fit the alien template people expected in 1952. It seemed mechanical rather than biological, almost like a pilot still attached to its craft. The US Air Force investigated under Project Blue Book. Biologist Ivan T. Sanderson traveled to Flatwoods personally and concluded that intelligently controlled objects had flown over West Virginia that night, with one possibly being the creature's vehicle. Ufologists Strategist Major Donald Kehoe went further, claiming the Air Force sent undercover agents to the area to suppress the story. Multiple witnesses. Government investigation. A creature that looks less like folklore and more like something pulled from a redacted file. And nobody ever explained what made those people sick. But if Cold War paranoia gave us the Flatwoods Monster, wait until you hear about a creature that's been terrorizing an entire desert for centuries. Mongolian deathworm. The Mongolian deathworm is the cryptid equivalent of an overhyped movie trailer. Locals in the Gobi Desert call it Olgoi Korkoi, and the legends are absolutely wild. This thing supposedly weighs half a pound, stretches about 2 feet long, and can kill a human on contact, either by spraying venom or discharging an electric charge like a living battery. Western audiences first heard about it through explorer Roy Chapman Andrews, who mentioned the creature in his 1926 book On the Trail of Ancient Man. But here's the thing. Andrews himself said he didn't believe it existed. The guy who introduced it to the world was already calling it nonsense. That didn't stop people from looking. Zoological journalist Richard Freeman trekked into the Gobi specifically to find one and came back with nothing, calling the creature apocryphal. The reality TV show Destination Truth ran a dedicated search from 2006 to 2007. Also nothing. Multiple expeditions, zero worms. The most likely explanation. When researchers showed Mongolian locals a specimen of the Tartar sand boa, they confirmed it matched exactly what they'd been seeing. So the legendary death worm that kills on contact is probably just a regular snake, distorted by desert heat and distance. But if you think a misidentified reptile is underwhelming, wait until you hear about a cryptid whose entire existence traces back to a science fiction movie. Megalodon. Here's the thing about Megalodon. It's the only entry on this list that was absolutely, undeniably real. Otodus megalodon, literally meaning giant tooth, was the largest fish that ever lived. It dominated ancient oceans for roughly 20 million years, hunting whales, orcas, and seals like they were snacks. This thing ruled the seas from about 23 million years ago until it vanished during the mid to late Pliocene around 3.6 million years ago. So what killed a perfect predator? New analysis of chemicals in fossilized megalodon teeth revealed something nobody expected. It was warm-blooded with a body temperature roughly 7 degrees Celsius, warmer than the surrounding seawater. That meant it could swim faster and range farther than cold-blooded competitors. But that advantage came at a brutal cost. Maintaining that internal furnace required enormous amounts of energy. When sea levels dropped, coastal habitats shrank, prey populations collapsed, and great white sharks started competing for the same food. Megalodon was trapped in an evolutionary corner it couldn't escape. Now, the maybe it's still out there crowd is loud on social media, especially after a diver recently pulled a fully intact 6-inch megalodon tooth off the coast of Florida. But megalodon specialist Jack Cooper at Swansea University puts it bluntly. Any suggestion that megalodon potentially still exists in unexplored ocean regions is complete nonsense based on not a shred of credible evidence. A predator this size would be impossible to miss. But if you think a real extinct giant is wild, wait until we talk about a creature people swear is still walking the Himalayas. Yeti. In 1925, a photographer named N.A. Tambazi, a member of the Royal Geographical Society, spotted a figure at roughly 15,000 feet near Zimu Glacier. He watched it from 200 to 300 yards for about a minute and described it as exactly like a human being, walking upright and stopping occasionally to pull at some dwarf rhododendron bushes. 2 hours later, he found bipedal prints 6 to 7 inches long. That's not some anonymous forum post, that's a credentialed researcher with the Royal Geographical Society, and the evidence kept stacking up. One of the most striking footprint discoveries produced prints measuring 14 inches from heel to toe, with the great toe set back to one side, an alignment that some researchers argued matched a great ape rather than a human. Then came the expeditions. 1983 into Nepal's Baran Valley. 2007 when Joshua Gates found prints 33 centimeters long with 5 toes in the Everest region. 2010 Chinese searches in Hubei province. And in 2019, an Indian Army mountaineering team reported prints measuring 81 by 38 centimeters near Makalu Base Camp. Here's the thing though, every single hair sample attributed to the Yeti has tested as coming from mundane Himalayan wildlife. Tibetan blue bear, Himalayan brown bear, langur monkeys. A century of expeditions, and the best physical evidence keeps pointing to animals we already know about. But the footprints and the eyewitness accounts from credible observers, those haven't gone away either. So, and that tension is exactly what keeps the Yeti near the top of any serious cryptid list. But if you think snowy mountains make a creature hard to find, wait until you see what's been hiding in plain sight a lot closer to home. Jersey Devil, Most people know the Jersey Devil as a cursed baby that sprouted wings and flew up a chimney. And honestly, that version is entertaining enough. A woman named Leeds, pregnant with her 13th child in 1735, supposedly cursed the baby in frustration, saying, "Let the child be the devil." The kid was born normal, then immediately grew wings, a tail, and claws, beat everyone in the room with its tail, and flew straight up the chimney into the Pine Barrens of New Jersey. Great story, but the real origin is way better. Historian Brian Regal traced the legend not to a cursed birth, but to a colonial political feud. Daniel Leeds, a Quaker publisher in the late 1600s, was ostracized by his community for printing astrological symbols in his almanacs. The Burlington Quaker meeting censored his work, called it blasphemous, and when Leeds switched to Anglicanism and started publishing anti-Quaker tracts, they branded him straight up evil. They literally published a pamphlet called Satan's Harbinger Encountered, accusing him of working for the devil. Here's the kicker: the Leeds family crest featured winged dragons. So you've got a guy the entire community calls a devil slapping dragon imagery on everything he publishes. The Leeds Devil was born, and it had nothing to do with a baby. The term Jersey Devil didn't even appear in newspapers until the 20th century. The first major wave of sightings hit in 1909, which is when the now familiar image got locked in. Bat wings, horsehead, claws, basically a dragon. The whole thing is a centuries-old smear campaign that took on a life of its own. And honestly, that's scarier than any cursed baby story because it means folklore can be weaponized. But if political grudges creating monsters sounds wild, wait until you hear about a cryptid that was literally invented by a movie: Chupacabra. In 1995, 8 sheep were found dead in Puerto Rico, 3 puncture wounds in the chest, reportedly drained of every drop of blood. Within months, 150 farm animals and pets were killed around the town of Canovanas, and the entire island was in full panic mode. They called the creature Chupacabra, Spanish for goat sucker, and the hysteria spread fast. We're talking sightings as far as Maine, Chile, Russia, and the Philippines. But here's where this entire legend falls apart, and honestly, it's one of the funniest debunkings in cryptid history. The most detailed early description came from an eyewitness named Madeline Tolentino. Spines on the back, alien-like features, the whole package. Her account became the foundation for what people believed the Chupacabra looked like. Then researcher Benjamin Radford spent 5 years investigating. 5 years. And what he found was that Tolentino had watched the 1995 sci-fi horror film Species before her sighting. The alien creature Syl in that movie is nearly identical to her description. She literally watched a horror movie and thought it was happening outside her window. And the blood draining? Never confirmed, not once. Puerto Rican veterinarian Dr. David Morales analyzed 300 reported Chupacabra victims. 0 had been bled dry. The only way to actually verify blood loss is through necropsy, and every necropsy came back normal. As for the North American version, that hairless fanged thing with a spinal ridge that started popping up in the early 2000s, scientists identified those as coyotes and wild dogs suffering from mange. Regular coyote attacks leave puncture wounds on uneaten carcasses, which looks plenty mysterious to a panicked farmer who's already heard the legend. The Chupacabra isn't a monster, it's a movie, some sick coyotes, and a whole lot of fear doing the heavy lifting. But at least the Chupacabra has a funny explanation. The next cryptid on this list has roots so ancient that sailors were afraid to even speak its name: Kraken. Most cryptids fall apart the moment you look at them too closely. The Kraken is the opposite. The closer you look, the more real it gets. First named in a Norwegian glossary by Kristen Jensen back in 1646, the Kraken was described as a many-armed sea monster that grabs boats and drags them straight into the abyss. Norwegian fishermen claimed its body measured many miles in length, and when it surfaced, it seemed to cover the entire sea, already terrifying. But Eric Pontoppidan took it further in 1753 when he popularized the creature for the English-speaking world. He described the Kraken as so massive it was sometimes mistaken for a cluster of small islands, with fish swimming in the gaps between its body parts so plentifully that Norwegian fishermen would actually risk fishing directly over it. That's where the old saying comes from: you must have fished on Kraken. The reward was incredible. The danger was worse. When the Kraken submerged, it created a whirlpool compared to Norway's famous maelstrom. Pontoppidan noted the creature was said that if its arm arms were to lay hold of the largest man of war, they would pull it down to the bottom. Here's the thing. Unlike almost every cryptid on this list, the Kraken wasn't entirely fictional. Giant squid grow up to 43 feet in length. Sailors were genuinely encountering something enormous in those waters. The legend didn't come from nothing. It came from something real, exaggerated by terrified men on wooden boats staring into black water. But if you think an ancient sea monster with a real-world explanation is unsettling, wait until we get to a creature that has zero explanation and an entire sacred culture begging outsiders to stop talking about it. Skinwalker. This one's different from everything else on this list, and I need to be upfront about that. In Navajo culture, a skinwalker, or Yi Nal Lushi, translates to by means of it, it goes on all fours. It's a malevolent witch with the ability to transform into, possess, or disguise themselves as an animal. And that term is never used for healers. It specifically describes someone who has chosen corruption, someone who performs nefarious acts to gain the power of transformation. Skinwalkers are the dark mirror of medicine people, the complete antithesis of Navajo cultural values. The animals associated with them tend to be tricksters or symbols of death, like the coyote. Here's what makes this entry unique. Traditional Navajo people rarely discuss skinwalkers with outsiders. Part of that is cultural taboo. But as Cherokee Nation academic Adrian Keene explains, the bigger issue is that non-Navajos simply lack the cultural context these stories are embedded in. When outsiders pull these legends into their own writing, Keene points out it forces Native people into a position of fielding questions about sacred traditions that are not things that need or should be discussed by outsiders. She said this specifically in response to J.K. Rowling incorporating the legends into her work. And here's the thing nobody notices. The skinwalker stories you've seen on Reddit, in horror podcasts, on creepypasta forums, they almost always follow the same structure, a road encounter where the protagonist barely escapes. That format doesn't appear in traditional Navajo accounts at all. It's an entirely non-native invention layered on top of something sacred. This is the only cryptid on this list where talking about it at all carries genuine cultural weight. But if the skinwalker represents spiritual corruption from within, the next entry represents something even more terrifying, a hunger that consumes you completely. Wendigo. Most cryptids are something you spot in the woods. The Wendigo is something you become, and that distinction is what makes it one of the most terrifying legends ever created. Born from the Algonquin-speaking tribes of the Great Lakes in northeastern North America, the Wendigo is the embodiment of insatiable greed, isolation, and cannibalism. It wasn't invented to scare children, it was a moral framework, a warning about what happens when a person abandons their humanity during the desperate starvation of winter. Traditional descriptions are genuinely nightmarish, emaciated, sometimes 15 feet tall, gaunt skin stretched over bones, bloody chewed lips, a heart encased in ice, and so ravenous it eats its own body. The transformation is literal and spiritual, greed consuming a person from the inside out. But here's where it gets real. The most infamous Wendigo case isn't fiction. Swift Runner was a respected Cree trapper who, in the winter of 1878 to 1879, took his wife, 6 children, his mother, and his brother deep into the remote Alberta wilderness. Only he came back. He claimed they all starved. Investigators weren't buying it. Swift Runner looked healthy, well-fed. At his camp, they found butchered remains, a pot of human fat, and bones cracked open for marrow. He confessed to cannibalizing his entire family. And here's the detail that still haunts researchers. His youngest son was killed after spring had arrived. Food was accessible. Starvation wasn't the reason. Swift Runner claimed possession by a Wendigo spirit, and his case became foundational in the study of Wendigo psychosis, a documented syndrome where victims develop cannibalistic urges even when other food is available. The Wendigo works because it was never just a monster story, it was a warning, and Swift Runner proved the warning was real. But if a creature born from human corruption disturbs you, wait until you hear about something that was never human at all. Mothman. November 1966, Point Pleasant, West Virginia. 2 young couples come tearing out of the local woods, claiming they saw something humanoid with 10-foot wings and glowing red eyes. The local paper slaps the name Mothman on it, and within days, the entire town shows up armed to the teeth, ready to hunt this thing down. They never found it, but here's what makes Mothman different from almost every other cryptid on this list. It has a birth certificate, an exact date, an exact location, exact witnesses. Bigfoot has been around forever. Nessie has vague sightings going back back decades. Mothman, mid-November 1966. That's it, and the location matters. The first sighting happened in what locals called the TNT area, a cluster of abandoned World War II explosives factories with contamination still leaching into the surrounding environment. People started wondering whether the creature was something irradiated, a product of the pollution itself. Then everything stopped. December 1967, just over a year after the first sighting, the Silver Bridge collapsed. A major route in and out of Point Pleasant gone. More than 40 people killed. And afterward, witnesses claimed they'd seen the Mothman standing on the bridge the day before. That's the moment Mothman stopped being a monster and became an omen. A small town loses 40 of its own in a single catastrophe, and the collective grief finds meaning through the myth they'd been living with for a year. The Mothman wasn't just something they saw. It was something that tried to warn them. Today, Point Pleasant hosts an annual Mothman festival that draws more tourists than the town's actual population, a community that turned its strangest chapter into something that keeps it alive. But Mothman is far from the most famous cryptid in the world. That honor belongs to a creature hiding in a Scottish lake, Loch Ness Monster. Nessie is the most famous cryptid on the planet, and the story behind it is way more ridiculous than you think. In 1933, George Spicer and his wife were driving through the Scottish Highlands when a massive creature crossed the road in front of their car. Huge body, long neck, no visible limbs. It disappeared into Loch Ness before they could process what they'd seen. Weeks later, a motorcyclist described a prehistoric marine creature with 4 large fins. Visitors flooded the area. Then in November, Hugh Gray photographed what he claimed was the monster. And at the time, the general public treated photography as basically proof. If there was a picture, it was real. But here's where it gets truly absurd. On April 21st, 1934, the Daily Mail published the surgeon's photograph, credited to respected Dr. Robert Kenneth Wilson, that iconic image of a long neck rising from rippling water. Arguably the most famous cryptid image ever taken. It held for 60 years. Then in 1994, Christian Sperling admitted he built a model neck and mounted it on a toy submarine. That's it, a toy submarine. Wilson, the trusted doctor, was chosen specifically because his reputation would make people believe it. And the whole thing traced back to big game hunter Marmaduke Wetherill, who the Daily Mail had originally hired to find Nessie. Wetherill had been publicly humiliated when his enormous footprints were identified as having been made with a dried hippo's foot umbrella stand. So he staged the most famous cryptid photo in history using a children's toy to get revenge on the paper that embarrassed him. And it worked for 6 decades. Despite all of this, the official Loch Ness Monster Sightings Register documents 1,165 recorded sightings to date, with 17 webcam images logged since 2021. The hoax is exposed, the evidence is gone, and people keep looking. But if Nessie holds the crown for most iconic cryptid image, the next entry holds the crown for everything else. Bigfoot. Bigfoot is the king. No other cryptid comes close in terms of cultural saturation, and no other cryptid has a more frustrating evidence trail. Reported footprints measure up to 24 inches long and 8 inches wide, which sounds incredible until you notice that some of those casts contain claw marks. Claw marks consistent with bear anatomy. That detail matters more than you think. Ecological niche modeling on reported Bigfoot sightings across North America found an almost perfect overlap with the habitat range of the American black bear. A bear that walks upright, a bear that from a distance has a broadly similar silhouette to what people describe as Sasquatch. That's not a coincidence, that's an explanation. But then there's the Patterson-Gimlin film. Shot in 1967 at Bluff Creek in Northern California, it remains the most famous alleged Bigfoot footage ever captured. Critics argue the whole thing was staged. Supporters counter that Bluff Creek is genuinely remote, deep in the woods, which is a strange place to orchestrate a hoax. After nearly 60 years, nobody has definitively settled the debate. Everything else is a graveyard of dead ends, hair samples with no match. Melba Ketchum's 2012 press release claiming Bigfoot DNA proved it was a human primate hybrid from 15,000 years ago, a study that was never successfully peer-reviewed and remains scientifically discredited. Reported Bigfoot vocalizations are scattered and wildly inconsistent, nothing like the identifiable patterns you'd expect from any real large animal. And in 2012, a man in Montana was killed by a car while wearing a ghillie suit on a highway, pretending to be Bigfoot, which might be the most honest thing that's ever happened in this field. As for what Bigfoot actually smells like, Bigfoot Discovery Museum owner Michael Rugg claims to have caught a whiff. His description: imagine a skunk that had rolled around in dead animals and had hung around the garbage pits, which is, at the very least, a vivid way to close out a cryptid list. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, click the video on the screen now.